Hi everyone and welcome to my new Dive Bomb Falconer guide for cycle 1.1, the next last epoch cycle that is starting very soon on Tuesday. This is a build I have played a lot back in 1.0. This is what I've been using to race to world first. I reached level 100 on hardcore solo after around 25 hours with this build. And I've also pushed it on hardcore to 1000 corruption, done all of the tier 4 dungeons, and well, basically everything there is, so to say. And I also managed to hit like arena wave, I think 440 or so before I ripped on this character. So that was kind of cool, and it remains one of the top dogs in the game. There are some nerfs to this build, but I have actually gone in and tested this, as you can see here. Had like 11 points unspent, 7 unspent there. So I've been trying this out a little bit earlier, just to see and imitate those nerfs a little bit to see what is actually happening. If you have seen this build before or played it before, what you need to know is falconry has been tuned down a little bit, so the falcon generally does a bit less damage, and there's like some other tweaks here, in particular Avian Arsenal, which is where you transfer some of your character's damage to the falcon, has been nerfed a little bit, and the dive bomb has been adjusted, in particular the Shadow Falcons. So they now do 60% less damage instead of 25% less damage, and also they nerfed dive bomb overall a little bit. So turns out not really as much of a nerf as I had anticipated. There are some other small things here and there, but the overall bottom line, I guess, is that Dive Bomb and Falcons will do probably something like half or so of its original damage, plus minus, depending on, for example, how deep you lean into these Shadow Falcons, how often you actually activate them. This is mostly like for bosses, really important, but in general, like echo runs, like mapping, it doesn't really matter all too much. So I can also show this in action here. Like, for example, instead of doing like 1000 corruption, I just kind of like went in here. This is 540 corruption. I can just show you a run here and maybe an Oribus real quick to see how this looks like. So I did remove a lot of damage. This is patch 1.0 still for my setup. For example, we do not have those 15% and those 15% here. I only have 1 point there. This is actually like basically over nerfed compared to what you can expect. And generally, this is like, yeah, way weaker than it should be, basically. So I also took out a lot of damage here, and only 2 shadows instead of 4 or 3 there. So there's a bunch of stuff, basically. But keep in mind, this is a relatively juiced up character. So I played this on hardcore for roughly 100 hours or so. I guess I kind of stopped gearing after, like, let's say 50 hours. So this is like a relatively high-end character for Circle of Fortune standards here. Very tanky. I have 3,700 life, as you can see. And as I mentioned, I went up to 1000 corruption. But yeah, it goes pretty smooth here, as you can see. It still kind of like destroys pretty much all the packs. One shot, you just press your Falcon Strikes to do packs, and then you press your Dive Bomb. So number 1 and number 4 are your nuke skills, and other than that, it's kind of like running. And you're trying to stay alive, basically running. Sometimes you shoot here. This is the Explosive Trap, which shoots traps up in the air that come down and give us mostly buffs and buff the Falcon. They don't actually do damage here. I can't really kill anything, just right-clicking, as you can see. Well, a little bit, I guess. But most of the damage comes from number 1 and number 4 here. These are the Falcon skills. So pretty straightforward. And then you shift around. That gives you a bunch of healing, a bunch of mana. We have the Smoke Bomb, which is very nice. So you pop this down. We have a guaranteed Silver Shroud for a guaranteed dodge. So you can sometimes use this, for example, on boss mechanics to avoid big one-shots or something like that. Very useful. And just to stay alive in general, it gives you Dust Shrouds. You see here on our bar we have 15 Dust Shrouds very easily. We can go up to 20. We can actually have 100% chance for Glancing Blow on this build, which is very nice and smooth, and also gives us extra defense. So in addition to the life, we also have capped endurance here on this character, with a 1300 endurance threshold, for example, when you don't get hit recently. I have a lot of armor on this character, so we have like 41% armor. I think that goes up a little bit sometimes. The dodge is very nice. When you shift, you get like 80% dodge chance or so, because there's a node for it. So overall, lots of layers here of defense, and this makes it so that it's actually very hardcore viable. This is actually the build that I intend to play again for the world first race for Aberoth. So I'm not really sure like how hard Aberoth will be, but if nothing goes horribly wrong, I am fairly confident I can get there, and I guess we'll see. And despite the nerfs, it should be alright. But yeah, this is like what an Oribus looks like, with like 540 corruption. And this is not really like even such a smooth fight here, because you kind of want to keep the boss inside of the smoke bombs as much as possible for the Shadow Falcons to pop off. But you see here, he dies fairly fast. Nothing really to worry about. And yeah, in softcore in particular, you can definitely juice this up a lot more for a lot more damage. This is, you know, very, very tanky. I've made a lot of sacrifices here for extra life and so on, the way I build it, but it did the job for me. And here comes the execute. Bam. All right, 16% execute. Very nice about this here. And that is a build. So I can show you the planner, the Dive Bomb Falconer planner here. There is also a Maxwell guide I want to shout out really quick. There's a Falconer leveling guide by Tarek. There's also the Dive Bomb endgame guide by Lizard here. That is fairly similar to this. So they have a bunch of different unique choices maybe. Like, for example, I don't go for the peak of the mountain, but it's a good item. A bunch of other like little tweaks and so on, but overall the same thing. If you prefer a written guide, I recommend you go follow this, and also like how to get to empowered monoliths, this here. I do not have like the exact like 1 to let's say 60 or so setup in the planner. This is kind of like a pure dive bomb thing that I have here. And for example, in the leveling guide for the early game, you go with a bit more of the puncture. You bleed enemies with puncture, and then you get the falcon at some point. You add that. You can do Cinder Strike as well instead for some more ignites and some fire damage, or you stick to the puncture until later on you get the full combo. Falcon Strikes unlocks as soon as you get the Falcon when you have a mastery, and Dive Bomb unlocks once you have spent 35 points in Falconer Tree. So this is kind of late, it's like late in the campaign basically where you get the full combo. Until then you have to play a little bit with puncture and either Cinder Strike or just stick to that, and then go with falconry. So if you want to see the early game of this, it is fairly smooth. It's a decent leveling setup as well. And this is what this will look like later on. I have imported my actual items here, so there's not like planner items. This is the stuff that I was using mostly from the character. So it doesn't have like perfect rolls and so on. It just gives you a bit of a general idea of what you're going for. For example, a lot of dexterity. This build scales a lot of dexterity, mostly thanks to the falconer tree. As this note here, where the damage of the falcon increases per dexterity. You want to have a lot of it. You see here I have 91, this can go way higher. There's also like these unique boots where you can scale your damage up even higher with dexterity. So that's something. And then you want dive bomb ranks and falconry ranks. You can get this on a helm and this on a chest. Unfortunately, I only had one here, but those are the two skills you want to rank up as much as possible. They are your bread and butter. And there's also the Talons of Valor unique bow here. This is relatively easy to acquire. They made it slightly harder to get it, but it shouldn't be a big problem. And this also has falconry ranks, dive bomb ranks, and also aerial assault. This is an alternative movement skill you can use instead of shift. I kind of tried both a lot. Aerial assault is kind of nice if you want to just speed run really fast, fly through the maps. You can run aerial assault, but shift just has the better utility with the better defense in particular. So if you want to push higher corruption, I felt way safer on shift. But both works. But either way, you can get a lot of these ranks here, and then you try to get maybe 2+ LP on this thing. Try to put a bunch of crit chance, for example, or fist pen, or minion damage, or flat damage. All this kind of stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff you can put here on a legendary bow of this, and then you start pumping with your falcon basically. But as soon as you get this bow, you can also, for example, if you run Circle of Fortune, try to go for some prophecies for unique bows. Not that hard to get this one. Even with 2 LP, very consistent. You see here it's a 1 in 12 on the bottom of the tooltip for 2 LP, and even 3 LP is very achievable if you try. So that's very nice. Then you obviously want to stack a bunch of minion damage. So for example, you have the turquoise rings for that. You can go other rings if you need to fix your res and so on. Don't just tunnel vision on this ring, but it is the best type here that you want to have. And once you have your resources figured or your resistances figured out, in general, like we put a lot of res here on a bunch of items. So here's bow physical damage. The physical damage is the best damage type you want to scale because yeah, you can have other damage types and also transfer that to your falcon, but you generally want to go for physical just for like the physical scaling basically. So they have like the best synergy by staying to one damage type, but it is not such a big deal if you have other damage types. Here a build should look like this. You want exactly minion damage, mana regen, and then health and more health. In particular, you want % health actually. I think an even better belt that I'm wearing might be here. This is a crazy one that I managed to craft. So this has double health with the hybrid. This is like a basically perfect belt. So something like that. This gives you a lot of health. Same on the boots. You can have the hybrid health there. You can have hybrid health on the boots. And also here you can health. So you have a lot of health. You want to try to stack it up as much as possible. There's like no ward or something in this build. just get health, get your resistances, and then dexterity, and a bunch of these like minion modifiers basically. So that's kind of what goes on here. I use the Aurora's Time Glass. This is mostly a hardcore item. This can be basically any other neck that you want with good stats. So this is not required at all. This is just what I have in the planner now. It just gives me a bunch of endurance. As I mentioned, we are endurance capped. There is also like a talent tree node that helps you out of endurance, which is very nice to prevent one-shots. So having this here is useful. And then we can also get more endurance either from the blessings, or you put it, for example, on your relic, or maybe on the ring. Here we have 25% endurance. So I really like to go kind of tanky. If you want to speed this up a bit more, like softcore strats, I would definitely recommend go more into cooldown recovery speed. We have some on the boots. You can also have some on the belt. Cooldown recovery speed just makes it faster. You can fly through the maps faster and so on. You can press your buttons more often. That's really nice. So try to get cooldown. Try to get a high roll of it. Get an exalted version of it or something like that. Otherwise, you can definitely replace like a little bit of health here and there to go for like more damage, or, you know, maybe instead of like a vitality roll, you can also do like a dex roll and these kind of things. Just try to squeeze in more damage on softcore, but otherwise, basically the same picture overall, I would say. Now, let's talk about the passives here. So, unfortunately, it doesn't show it in the right order. I'm not sure why. So, you have to put 20 points in your rogue tree to go to the other trees. So, we do that at the start, and then for some reason, it shows the Blade Dancer and the Marksman trees first. And instead of redoing the entire thing, just know, go for the Falcon tree first. So after the 20 points in the main class, you go for the Falcon tree and just kind of like fill out this entire Falcon tree here in this order. You can see the individual points. There's a few kind of key notes here that are pretty important. So number 1, coordinated fade, which is very strong. It gives you a silver shroud every 10 seconds when you use a certain ability on your bar. Now you can put more points into this, but you don't really want to. So this means that if you have 1 point in it, it uses your leftmost ability every 10 seconds. It will give you a free silver shroud. It gives you 100% dodge. This is kind of nice. You can combine this with the smoke bomb, but obviously you don't want to have smoke bomb on number 1 because smoke bomb already gives you a silver shroud. You want to have a different ability, but you can also just sacrifice 1 point from something else and put it there if you really don't want to adjust your keybinds or something like that. So you can do 2 points, 3 points, whatever. I would recommend put it on the Falcon Strikes. So Falcon Strikes is something that you use fairly regularly, like, you know, basically every few seconds or so, and then every so often, like usually every second use or every third use, you will get one of those silver shrouds. You see here, I have them right now, and this is very useful. Then there's also some other kind of important stuff here. There's a bunch of these threshold points, or these bonus points. For example, here you want to put 5 points here, and then you want to have, like for example, here 1 point in Ranger's Mark. This gives you a chance to buff your Falcon with more melee damage, which is very useful. Your Falcon scales a lot with like flat damage and uses it for its own abilities, and Dive Bomb gets like, I think, 700% effective added damage, for example, so the numbers go up really high. Here's also other stuff. For example, you want 3 points in Relentless Talons, so pay attention to those bonuses. You usually want to unlock those 3-point bonuses, 5-point bonuses, and so on. But we pick up a lot of life, a lot of damage here on the tree. There's also this maximum health gain at endurance threshold, which I talked about. This is another reason to scale endurance to 60%. You are well protected against one-shots on this build. As long as you don't get hit by many things at once, you will usually not die. One-shot protection is very powerful with all this endurance, and it felt really safe to play on hardcore. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of speed in here, a lot of damage, and you also get a lot of crit avoidance. So that's one thing to note here. Once you have 7 points in Finesse Them, you get 35% crit avoidance. So you don't really have the option to scale critical damage taken reduction. Basically, you want to go for 100% crit avoidance. So you can do it through this passive, and then you can do the blessing to get out of that. There's a blessing that you can get here. This is from, I think, the Reign of Dragons, that gives you up to 70% crit avoidance. So those two things already cap you out. Makes it very nice and smooth as well for the defense. And the rest in the other traits, we pick up a bunch of Glancing Blow chance. Glancing Blow, to get out of the dust shrouds you will reach 100% pretty reliably. There's also this node here that you can pick, mostly more of a hardcore choice, but I really like it. A bunch of Glancing Blow and double Glancing Blow chance if not hit recently. So again, pretty big one-shot protection. You only need 50% Glancing Blow to get then 100%. And when you get a Glancing Blow proc, it means you take 35% less damage. So this is pretty powerful defense here. In general, you can kind of just like run around a lot. So when you play the character, you don't really have to attack very often. You shoot once here, you shoot once there, and otherwise you just kind of like run, press your Falcon. It's an instant cast. You press your dive bomb, it's an instant cast, you shoot again. And this is also thanks to this node here, the intuitive connection. I almost forgot to mention this. This makes these instant casts. Before that, you actually have an animation, but you unlock it fairly soon. And then it just helps you out to stay moving all the time. This also gives you, for example, damage reduction here from evasion on the rogue tree. So there are some synergies to actually not stopping and attacking so often. And you don't really have to that much. This explosive trap is mostly there to buff you and buff the Falcon. And lastly, in the marksman tree, we pick up a bunch of dex, dodge rating debuff, and here's bow damage, crit chance, and the crit vulnerability chance. I like to put like a few points here just to stack up this crit vulnerable chance. This just helps out with your Falcon doing 100% crits all the time. But eventually, you can get to the point where you don't even need this anymore. You can maybe free up some things here in the late game and get some points back and put them somewhere else. Let's talk about the skills here. So this is the explosive trap. We can also show this in-game. This is what it looks like. The number one node here is Blast Rain. So usually you throw a trap with the explosive trap and Blast Rain converts it into a bow skill. So you want to rush this node, and then you also want to get as many traps as possible, and you want to buff your pet, right, like the Falcon, with the Sky Signal. So you want to go to Blast Rain and then go down here. This gives you extra elemental and physical pen. And this can stack 15 times in the new patch, so this has also been nerfed a little bit, and it's also 2% I think instead of 3. But it's still like 30% pen, which is pretty good. And you also have the cooldown recoveries here. This is like as you shoot, basically, as these traps explode, you get the cooldown recovery, so you can kind of use the Falcon Strikes and the dive bomb more often by just shooting your traps. And the more traps you have, the more explosions, the more you get these procs. There's also the smoke traps. This makes it so they get these dust shrouds all the time, so you can kind of produce them on your own by just shooting. And all the other stuff on a tree is just to make sure you have more traps. There's a trap sprinkler. There is traps to throw more traps. There is mana cost reduction, mana efficiency, just to help you out a little bit. You want a little bit of mana regen to sustain this easily at the start. So you can actually get to the point where you even use automated bombardment, which does add a heavy extra mana cost. But then you have even more traps. But I would probably not really go for it anymore these days. I would just go, you know, these traps here, and you also have more traps here. There is an extra cold and an extra lightning trap. So we shoot in total 3 fire, 1 cold, 1 lightning. And you can also put 1 point here in the chill, which is very nice. Chill is a very powerful defense. You stack it very easily. So I would also recommend to go for 1 point there. So maybe take out 1, I think here in the trap sprinkler. I think I changed that already on the planner. But either way, we picked up the chill here. That is really nice. On my character right now, I don't need it because I have chill chance on my ring, for example. I managed to get a 4 LP hollow finger that has chill, so I didn't need that point. But this is what it looks like, and you see here there's fire, 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 and then 1 lightning, 1 cold. You have in total 5 traps, giving you lots of opportunities to proc all these sky signal effects, the free lofting bird, and also the dust shrouds. So this is kind of your main skill that you spam, but you don't have to do it that much. For shift. Shift is basically like your main mobility tool. What you want to pick up here is cooldown and the haste buff, and then the mana gain. This just helps you to sustain very early on. It's really cool. You get invulnerability while shifting, can shift through beams and ground effects and stuff like that. There's also an ailment cleanse up here that is really cool. And you also have the cooldown reset if you get a big hit. Otherwise, a bunch of healing, a bunch of dodge that you just want to pick up later, basically. So a very straightforward setup here. Then we have the Falcon. So for testing, I removed all these points. Let's go back on the planner. This looks like this here. The number 1 point is Falconer's Journey. And then also other really important point, is it a bird? And Agile Prey. This gives you just like general global damage buffs basically for your entire Falcon, including the dive bomb. So this affects the dive bomb as well. This is why you want to pick it up very soon. There's also remaining cooldown recovered after a skill use. So you want to do that. This helps you out a lot just to get the Falcon Strikes back really soon. And then there's a bunch of buffs here for your pet. So Train to Hunt makes it so that your bow damage applies to your Falcon damage. So you want to try to, for example, get a % damage to bows or something on your weapon. There's also the same with the crit. And then there's also crit multi here. And you can also stack this up by using your abilities. So this basically converts your stats into Falcon stats. Same thing up here with Avian Arsenal. This is getting nerfed to only 5 stacks, so much easier to maintain. But basically, your Falcon hits will apply the mark, and you consume the mark of your own hits, buffing your Falcon. And then your flat additional added damage to bows, for example, is then transferred to a falcon as well. So you want to try to keep up all these effects, and the rest is just, yeah, more hits for your falcon strikes. There's a bit of life and mana regain, which is nice. There's the execute, 16% execute is really cool. There's also additional falcon strikes. This is kind of optional, so once you have these extra ranks from, for example, the bow, you can pick up these things here on the side. But everything else you kind of want to have as soon as possible, and this will buff your falcon majorly. Now let's talk about the smoke bomb here. So this is a very important defensive tool. So one thing you want to do here is you want to get the shadows as soon as possible. So this is a combination with the dive bomb, because you can create one shadow each second for the smoke bomb, and then you have the shadow falcons. So this is mostly a tool to buff your damage against bosses. Basically, you have a shadow, you throw in a dive bomb, and then when there's a shadow active in the smoke bomb, it will create a second falcon, basically a shadow falcon that comes out of it and hits again. And not only that, it hits twice again because of this node here. So they dive twice for each shadow that is there, and you can put multiple points. Usually 3 or 4 points is what you're going for. So basically you throw down the smoke bomb and you see the shadow spawning. You see there's like, you know, one appearing here, 2, 3, and then you throw down the dive bomb afterwards, and like this you're gonna get multiple impacts. So you see this here again, there's a few bunch of shadows, and then you do this, and then you see boom, 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 boom. There's like multiple impacts basically. So this is what you want to go for, but not necessarily at the start. So this is kind of like the end game combo here, where you boost your boss damage, especially in the higher corruption. This starts to matter, but early on not really so important. Instead, I would recommend go for the cooldown recovery speed. We go remaining cooldown recovered. There's a lot of these cooldown recovery effects here. Again, when you shoot with your bow, for example, you get this effect. It kind of comes back really quickly. There's also the reduced delay here. This makes it way smoother, because otherwise you have to wait for a falcon to actually do the dive bomb. It takes a while. Reduced delay is very good. And for example, here we have a massive damage buff from Devastating Dive that also increases the cooldown, which is not really so bad because you recover part of the remaining cooldown. So as soon as you get like 5 procs of this, you basically have your dive bomb back no matter what, no matter how much the original cooldown was basically. There's also some other nice stuff here, mana cost reduction, you gain mana back. So depending on if you really need the mana or not, you can kind of like, you know, tweak this a little bit. I also have the extra smoke bomb duration, so this helps you out on the bosses. Just like put down a smoke bomb, throw in a dive bomb, and there you go, and it kind of like lasts longer, and then you can do like another smoke bomb, get more shadows, and you go boom, 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 like this basically. So that's how you fight bosses, especially if they're stationary. This is a really big damage buff. Otherwise, just always use dive bomb on the fly. There's also this extra area here. I think in the planner I actually have this. So I took the plus 30% area, just helps you to overlap the explosions better, especially while mapping. It also just gives you better clear, but this is also optional. So for bossing, I don't think you really need to go for this. You can improve your damage a little bit with 2 other points somewhere, but I really like having like 2 points here. Also gives you the slow, which might help a little bit for sustain or like for defense. And this is kind of what this tree looks like. Finally, let's talk about the loot filters. So I do have some 1.0 loot filters. They have not been updated yet because the patch is not out, so I cannot really do anything with the new rules yet, but I do have an early monolith filter and an empowered monolith filter. Nothing for leveling, but as I said earlier, I do recommend the Falconer leveling guide from Maxroll. There is a loot filter there for the campaign. Go check it out as well. And here I have basically a lot of rules to like just show good stuff for this build. Depending on your progression, you might want to check a few more of these rules because it's a very strict filter that I have here. And I have basically like less strict versions turned off here. There's also a bunch of like, for example, shatter stuff, certain stats that you want to try to accumulate some shards for example. You get class specific shards and these kind of things. And here's like experimental items that show ascendancy bases, if you want to like use your rune of ascendancy to try to get the bow, for example, these kind of things. So depending on your progression, you might want to check or uncheck a few more things here. And kind of similar for the early monolith stuff, this has like a lot more like rare items showing and a lot more like lower end gear showing, and then later you can switch to this. So I will also export both these filters and also add them to the YouTube description here. And that also concludes this guide here. So hope you enjoyed my Dive Bomb Falconer guide for patch 1.1 in Last Epoch. I'm very excited to jump in again. So this is going to be my racing setup, kind of same as last time. And turns out I just enjoy the Falconer a lot. I'm kind of in the mood to play it again, and it looks good for the hardcore race. So let's see what will happen. So I wish you good luck in the Last Epoch cycle. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.